February 1895. Alfred Dreyfus had been arrested for treason and sent to Devil's Island to rot, based on falsified evidence and testimony on flimsy handwriting evidence. 3 years later, the real traitor is exposed, but what follows is a sham trial as the military doubles down on their miscarriage of justice. Dreyfus's obvious innocence and cover-up is made public in Émile Zola's Jaures, and the case catches the attention of a man who would become one of France's great political icons. Jean Jaurès is remembered today as a socialist leader, a defender of workers, and one of the strongest advocates for Alfred Dreyfus. But before the Dreyfus affair, Jaurès was not yet the iconic figure we now imagine. He was a philosopher, a republican, a man still defining his political identity. Understanding who he was before the affair explains why he hesitated to be involved at first, and why he ultimately became one of its most powerful defenders. This is Metro Stop Podcast, and I'm your host, Kelly Blair. Jaurès is a station on Line 2, opened in February 1903. Originally called Rue d'Allemagne, which was changed in August 1914 due to rising tensions before World War I. He has another station, Boulogne-Jean Jaurès, on Line 10, which opened in 1980. Jean Jaurès was born on the 3rd of September 1859 in Castres, a small town in the Tarn region of southern France. His family was middle class and Protestant, a minority in a largely Catholic country. This background mattered. Protestants in France had a long tradition of valuing education, civic responsibility and moral independence. He excelled in school and earned a place at the École Normale Supérieure in Paris, one of the most competitive institutions in the country, where he studied philosophy. His early writings show a young man interested in ethics, metaphysics and the moral foundations of society. This philosophical grounding would later influence his political life. After graduating in 1881, Jaurès became a philosophy teacher in Toulouse. He wrote about the nature of consciousness, the meaning of duty, and the moral responsibilities of citizens. He admired Republican thinkers like Jules Michelet, who saw the French Revolution as a moral project as much as a political one. In 1885, at just 26 years old, Jaurès was elected to the Chamber of Deputies as a moderate Republican. He supported secular education, democratic reforms and workers' rights. But cautiously, he was not yet a socialist. He believed the Republic could gradually improve society through legislation and civic participation. He lost his seat in 1889 to a Conservative opponent. This defeat pushed him back toward academic life, but it also set the stage for the event that would transform him. In 1892, coal miners in Carmaux went on strike after their socialist mayor was dismissed by the mine owners. The government sided with the owners and the workers were left without protection. Jaurès visited Carmaux, spoke with the miners and wrote about the strike. He saw firsthand the imbalance of power between workers and employers and the limits of moderate republicanism. This experience changed him. He concluded that the Republic could not be truly democratic unless it also addressed economic inequality. By 1893, he was re-elected to Parliament as a socialist with strong support from the working class. It's important to note that Jaurès' socialism was never purely economic, but humanistic and ethical, grounded in the conviction that society must protect the vulnerable and every person should be allowed to live with dignity. He believed socialism should work through democratic institutions. It was gradualist. He rejected violent revolution and class warfare. He began writing a monumental socialist history of the revolution, written under the triple inspiration of Marx, Plutarch and Michelet. It gave new impetus to studies on France's revolutionary period and argued that it was the beginning of a long democratic process and its ideals pointed towards a more equal society. Jaurès also respected the army as a republican institution, believing it should serve the nation. not political factions. Like Clemenceau, he was wary of militarism, but did not assume that the army was corrupt. When the Dreyfus affair erupted, Jaurès initially hesitated. The Socialist Party officially refused to engage, calling the case a bourgeois affair. Jaurès focused on labour issues, education and parliamentary reforms. But as evidence of misconduct accumulated, Zola's letter, Clemenceau's support, the sham trial, the acquittal of Esterhazy, he underwent a profound transformation. The affair became, for him, a test of the Republic's legitimacy. If the state could knowingly condemn an innocent man, then no citizen was safe. Jaurès used his oratory to reframe the affair, not as a Jewish question, not as a military question, but as a question of universal justice. He argued that the Republic must be strong enough to admit its mistakes. His speeches in the Chamber of Deputies electrified supporters and infuriated nationalists. In his speech, The Socialist Interest, Jaurès lets rip and calls out the moral collapse of the Republic. I'm going to break it down. Jaurès insists that the military court condemned Dreyfus using secret evidence, a direct betrayal of the Declaration of the Rights of Man. He asks, quote, "Yes or no, was that man judged based on pieces unknown to him?" He believes socialists must defend the human portion of the law. He draws a sharp distinction between laws that protect capitalist privilege and laws that protect human dignity and justice. Socialists, he argues, should destroy the first, but defend the second. The right to a fair trial is one of humanity's hard-won protections, and it must be protected even when the victim is a bourgeois officer, and the affair should not be ignored just because Dreyfus was not working class. He was falsely condemned, a victim of state violence. Jaurès warns that if the army can crush a bourgeois officer with forged evidence and secret files, it can do far worse to workers. The proletariat is the group the most threatened by unchecked military power. Therefore, defending Dreyfus is defending the working class. He also points out that the case has shaken the bourgeois class. The socialists should seize the moment to discredit the military reactionaries and weaken the forces that could threaten or repress workers in the future. This speech, The Socialist Interest, is the moment Jaurès fuses socialist principles, republican legality, and human ethics. It shows why he became one of France's most formidable political voices, because he understood that injustice anywhere strengthens oppression everywhere. But Jaurès also understood something else that others did not, that the affair was not just about Dreyfus. It was about the gathering forces in Europe, nationalism, militarism, racial hatred, and forces that would one day explode into catastrophe. Jean Jaurès spent the years after the Dreyfus affair doing something no one else in France had ever managed. He united the fractured socialist movement of the Third Republic. Radicals, reformists, syndicalists, men who could barely sit in the same room as each other. He brought them together under one banner, one party, and one idea: that justice was not a slogan, but a political responsibility. And then he did something even harder. He tried to stop a war. In the summer of 1914, Europe was sleepwalking towards catastrophe. Newspapers beat the drums, nationalists still demanded revenge for 1871, the government prepared mobilisation orders. Most historians now agree that war was inevitable, but Jaurès, the philosopher, the orator, the man who had defended Dreyfus when it was dangerous, stood in the chamber and insisted that France must not lose its soul again. He believed peace was not cowardice. He believed diplomacy was not weakness. He believed that the working men of Europe had more in common with each other than the generals who would send them to die. And for that, he was hated. On the evening of July 31st, 1914, Jaurès sat in the Café du Croissant on Rue Montmartre, reviewing the final edition of Humanity, the newspaper that he had founded. Outside, Paris buzzed with rumours of war. A young nationalist named Raoul Villain walked in, approached him at the window, and fired 2 shots. Jaurès collapsed over the table. France lost the one man still fighting to keep it out of the abyss. 2 days later, World War was declared. Villain would be acquitted after the war. Jaurès would be buried with national honours. He has 2 metro stations in Paris alone, and one was renamed the day after he was assassinated. I'm unsure of Jaurès' global profile, but he is an icon in France, and today more streets and public spaces in France bear his name than any figure, with the exception of Charles de Gaulle. Not because he was a martyr, but because he was a what if. What if he had lived? What might France have been if it had listened? Jaurès' life was clearly not defined by the Dreyfus affair. But the affair revealed that he was a man who believed that justice, peace and human dignity were worth fighting for, even when the nation marched in the opposite direction. Jaurès believed that a republic only survives when it has the courage to face its own failures. He had seen what happened when France chose silence over truth. In the affair, in the chamber, in the streets. He had spent his life insisting that justice was not a threat to the nation, but its foundation. But not everyone agreed. While Jaurès fought to reopen the Dreyfus case, another man in Paris feared that reopening it would tear the country apart. Where Jaurès saw a republic strong enough to confront its conscience, he saw a nation on the brink, fragile, divided. And as President of France, he believed his duty was not to expose the truth, but to contain it. That man was Félix Faure. That's next time on Metro Stop Podcast. My main source for the Dreyfus affair was a video by Sam Aronow. Biographies are from Britannica, and I've listed all other sources in the show notes. Music by Alex Productions.